Good afternoon. My name is Gary Kalis. Welcome to the 2016 Stencil Reunion. I'm here with my wife Kay from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And we're happy to be here, and it's a great day. We're going to have a wonderful, fun time with some jokes and a nice presentation. First off, I wanted to personally thank Lorraine Orrin and Kim Orrin for all of their hard work in planning for this reunion. Year after year, they do just a super job. I also would like to thank everyone else involved with helping with the reunion. I know the numbers sometimes we'd like them to be better, but I guess the people that are here actually want to be here, and we'll just have to keep promoting it as we go along. I've got an envelope laying on the table over there, so a little later in the afternoon I'll come around for those who I didn't fleece. I'll collect some money from you, and it's $10 for the wonderful lunch and the delicious cake. And by the way, there's lots of cake over there to be had. Before we get started, I would like to do two things. There was an introduction written by Kim in 2003 for this reunion, and I'd like to recite that to you. And then after that, I'd like to present a dedication. So let me give the introduction that Kim wrote in 2003. By attending these reunions, each of us honors all Stencil relatives and ancestors. We admire and appreciate the family of Paul Stencil and Juliet Kulat, the pioneers who in the 1880s moved halfway around the planet from Poland or Germany to America. When they moved to America, transformative historical changes were underway in Europe at that time. A decades-long struggle for political independence and liberation of working people was decisively crushed by Russia in 1864. At the same time, the United States was experiencing its own civil war. It was an age of political, economic, and social unrest throughout the world. A Russian dictator took over who was infamous for the number of executions that he ordered. The Russians withdrew all civil liberties from the Polish people, banned the Polish and Lithuanian languages, and opposed the Catholic Church at that time. The Poles then shifted to a grassroots political focus on education, economic development, and modernization. Throughout the late 1800s, large-scale mining and manufacturing operations began, which led to urbanization and capitalism. Aristocratic Polish landowners became less powerful at that time. Many common families abandoned the land on which they had lived and had worked. In that context, our pioneers left everything behind, sailed the Atlantic Ocean to New York, and somehow traveled to land in Minnesota where they settled. The Stencil pioneers' courageous actions set the stage for all of our lives. So the following dedication was adapted from the one that Father Eugene Stencil, who many of you know, wrote in 1984 for a Stencil reunion. And the dedication is this. In a part of Central Europe where war and poverty were familiar, are found the roots of our family bearing the surname Stencil. Paul Stencil, Juliet Kulat, married in 1856 in their native Poland. To that union were born 10 children over 20 years. Vincent, baby Stencil, Thomas, Mary, Susanna, Joseph, John, Anton, Frank, and Elizabeth. And because of the economic and political conditions in Poland, the oldest son, Vincent, left his village, and he set sail for America in 1882. After arriving in New York, Vincent traveled to the prairie lands of the new state of Minnesota and settled near Minnesota Lake. He was 23 years old at the time. About 2 years later, Paul and Julia and their 7 living children who were still in Poland decided to come to America, motivated by their strong sense of family and the importance of them reuniting. Around the 1st of June of 1884, they began the month-long trek over land and sea to their new home in Minnesota. Paul was 54 years old at that time, and Julia was 47. Today we honor these hardy pioneers, our ancestors. It was their strength, their foresight, their determination, and their Catholic faith and their love of their family that brought them here. This is their legacy to us, and for it we are grateful. We honor them by preserving their values and faiths, and especially by seeking to foster a strong family life. To Paul and Julia Stenzel and their family, we dedicate this day. So, with that, before we get started, I want to intersect a little joke here that I remember there was this fellow that actually he was Polish, but he might have been German, because last year when I talked to Kim and asked him who we are, he said, "Well, we may not be Polish, we could be German." And then I pressed him a little farther, and he says, "I really don't know who we are for sure." But he came to the United States a number of years ago, but he couldn't speak English. But he had a cousin that was here that could speak English. So he got over here and he liked it, and he liked to dine in restaurants, except he had a hard time ordering because he couldn't speak English. So he went back to see his cousin, and he says, "When I go to these restaurants, how do I order something?" And cousin thought for a minute, and he just said, "Well, just order apple pie and coffee." So, boy, he did that every day for about 3 weeks, but after about 3 weeks of apple pie and coffee, he wanted to change to something else. So he said, "Can you give me another idea on what to order in a restaurant?" And cousin said, "I'll tell you what, just say cheese sandwich." So he gets to the restaurant, same restaurant, waitress says, "What would you like today?" And he said, "Cheese sandwich." And she said, "Do you want that on pumpernickel or rye?" And he said, "I'll have apple pie and coffee."
What do you call a woman with one leg longer than the other? Eileen.
I can relate to that. I may have to change my name. Okay, today we're here to talk about Vincent and Paul Kay and Helen, Helen was our mother. And the original couple in the center of the plate came here in 1882 and 1884, I'm sorry. In 1882, Vincent came first, and then later that same year, Thomas came. And then I was looking at some information that I had, and it said that the mother, Juliana, said did not like it with two of her boys that far away. She says either they come back to Europe or we're going to America. And so she was very assertive, and they did. And you have to admire in those days to make that decision, even though you had two children who were not there. Minnesota became a territory in 1849 with St. Paul as its capital, and it became a state in 1858 with St. Paul remaining its capital. These are Paul and Juliana in the center of the bottom row, and on the left is Vincent, our ancestor, and all the rest of them are children, except I think there's one in the back row, second from the right, who was not one of their children. And Thomas, who was the second from the left in the back row, came the same year that Vincent did, but a little bit later. And Vincent, I also understand that Vincent came, and he had known his wife, Johanna Pojembo, in Europe, and she came here before he did. And so I read somewhere that he came here because she was here, and she lived in Minnesota Lake, I think with or near a brother of hers, and so Vincent then came to Minnesota Lake, and he was married then to Johanna Pajimbo, and they lived in Minnesota Lake, and they had 8 children, the third of which was Paul K., who was our ancestor, and Paul K. married Balbina Chickas in 1913. And that's another later picture. I think that was in the late 60s. Paul K. and Balbina had 8 children. From the left is Vincent. The second one is Daniel. Behind is Dominic, and then Raymond, and then Paul K. and Balbina. And next to Balbina is Helen, our mother, and Regina, and Gertrude, and Dolores. Quite a lineup, I think. Helen was the oldest of the children, and I'm guessing this picture is probably she was like 18 or 19 years old. I have no verification of that, but just kind of looking at her and the picture. She married Tony Sonic in 1933. She was 19 at the time, and Tony did custom corn shelling and threshing and had a fleet of trucks, and one of which was a gravel truck and one was a grain truck, and I don't know what the other one was, and he hauled whatever there was to haul. His association, I believe, in hauling grain led to a friendship and a business partnership with the elevator in Wells, and the elevator owner bought a turkey farm south of Wells, and he of course had the elevator, and so he didn't live out there, and he needed someone to farm that land, and so Tony and Helen did this. And when I say Tony and Helen, I mean Tony and Helen. They worked very, very hard on this land. It had rocks and trees and brush to be cleared, and they worked from daylight, sunrise to sunset every day. And they saved their money, and this is a picture of Helen and Tony in the early 50s, and they had 4 daughters. There's myself and Marlene and Jean and Sharon. There we are.
We have 3 of the 4 daughters here to present today, and Leanne is filling in for Jean, her mother. So here they are.
Here we are. So that's Helen in the back, and Jean next, and Sherry in the front, and myself in the back, and Marlene, and our father, Tony. They worked on this farm for quite a few years, and worked very hard and saved money because the ultimate goal was to buy some land. And I think my mother, Helen, got that from her mother, because that was very important to Balbina, that you should, if you were anybody, you owned some land, and everybody should strive to do this. So they worked very hard to save their money, and in the 50s, I would say 1955, they bought this land north of Wells, and then they began to clear that a little bit and plant that. There's the 4 daughters. There's their high school graduation pictures. Scary. And that's a picture of the 4 of us in our yard in Wells, Minnesota. And that truck in the background was one of the, he had one when they did the farm, worked the farm for the elevator person, he only had 1 truck. And when I worked at the canning factory, I drove that truck back and forth to the canning factory at night because that's all we had. There's a picture of Tony and the 4 daughters, Sharon and myself, Marlene in the back, and Jeannie in the foreground on the left-hand picture. The right-hand picture is Jean and Helen sitting, Marlene in the back, myself, and Sherry. Okay, then my family, backing up a little bit to this farm that they eventually bought north of Wells, they bought that in 1955, and my father passed away in 1956 at the age of 47, and left my mother with 4 daughters. I was 22, but the rest were all younger, much younger, and 4 daughters and a farm to pay for and keep, hopefully. So she went to a banker in Wells and convinced him that he should let her carry out the loan and keep the farm. And that happened. She had a lot of tenacity for a woman in those days, and that farm stayed in the family until 2010, I believe it was. So she accomplished a lot.
55 years or so, she kept it going.
One way or the other.
By herself.
Yeah. And if you think about a woman she was 41, I believe, when my father died, and had no business experience at all, but she made it work, and it was very important to her that she kept this farm to go to her 4 daughters eventually. This is 1956. I was married to Larry Oren, and the couple, the far left is my mother, and that was the same, not too long after my father died, and then Larry's mother and myself and Larry and his dad. This is another picture at that wedding, and I chose this because it had Balbina and Paul Kay on the right, my mother in the center, and the man on the left is Helen's brother next to her in the family line, Raymond, and his wife, Frances. This is a picture at that, and the people left to right are Marlene and Carol Oren, who was Larry's sister, and Sherry, and myself, and Jean. Look at those cars in the background. Isn't that crazy? Okay, and Larry and I had 3 children. Kim in the middle, who is here today, and Ron and Julie. And there's a picture there a little bit older. I would say that's probably in the early 70s.
I'd say early 80s.
Well, somewhere, I don't know. It is important. We had Christmas. These are the 3 children. Kim on the left, Julie in the center, and Ron on the right. And then the 2 boys on the right-hand side picture. There's another Christmas picture with Kim and Julie and Ron on the left, and Julie, my daughter, on the right. Another picture with the 2 boys and myself and Larry. The picture on the right, I chose that because it's priceless. If I show that to Ron today, he'll be, how come you showed that picture, Mom? Julie giving her brother a hug. It's probably an 8th birthday, I'm guessing.
Ron's birthday.
Yeah, Ron's 8th birthday. Every year they had a picture before they went to school, and this is our yard. We lived in Moline, Illinois at this time. We took many vacations camping, and we camped in a tent, and we went every year. My husband was an instrumental music teacher, so we had some time off, a couple weeks off, and this particular trip was around Lake Superior, and Julie was about 2 years old, so that would have been probably 1967, I'm guessing. This picture was taken at Lake Okoboji, and Kim and I took a drive yesterday out to Lake Okoboji, just because we'd gone there so many years, and they were probably 6 and 4 sitting on the dock, and we camped in a tent just up the hill from this. And we went out on a dock yesterday, and I'm thinking it's the same dock, but the whole lake is so different. When we camped there in the 60s, there was maybe 6 or 8 campers at most in tents. Now the whole lake is crowded with condos and businesses and houses and campers, and it was just unreal. I had a hard time yesterday. I had a hard time. And Kim has a story about this photograph.
So we went to Okoboji many times, and I love to catch sunfish off the dock like that. And there was this kid who we saw more than 1 year, and I might have been here. We're probably 4 and 6 or something like that. Getting some feedback here. And I think it's I just put my body between the. There was this kid who was older, and he would walk out on that dock, and again, she said, Lake Okoboji was much different then. There was hardly anybody, no commercial development, and now there are houses all around all those lakes. And so this kid used to walk out there, and he was a few years older than us, and he would talk to us. And then when our lines got tangled up, he would untangle them for us. And I was very impressed by that as a little kid, you know. And I said, one time I asked him, how do you do that? How do you get those untangled like that? And he said, I went to untangling school. You should have seen the knot they gave us for our final exam. So I recall that. And then when my brother was a little bit older than this, his preferred fishing method was a pop bottle cap tied on the end of his line, and he would put it in about 2 foot of water and just let it sit there, and the sunfish would come up and look at it. And that's how he liked to fish. And so that's how he started out fishing. So.
Today, that brother doesn't use pop bottle caps. He's a trout fisherman and uses a fly rod, so I guess there's some progression there somewhere. As I said, we did a lot of camping. I'm not sure, I don't remember for sure where this was, but they looked like they had a good time. This is a camping trip we took to Bennett Springs, Missouri. In southern Missouri, and it was always over Easter break, because we had a couple of days off from school then, and sometimes it was very cold, and you can look at the dress in this outfit that it was cold, and they caught a lot of fish, and they were good fishermen, all of them. And there's Julie and her fish at the same place. And the Kim has a story about this. This is also in Bennett Springs, Missouri.
So it's extreme southern Missouri. Usually, we went on spring break usually, so that was like late March, depending on when Easter was. And so the weather was usually warm down there, but it froze overnight this time, and this shows what our campsite looked like in the morning. But there's a story. You see those tags on our caps. In that previous picture, we had a big white tag sticking up. You had to buy a tag every day, and then at 7 o'clock in the morning, this whistle would blow, like a fire hydrant, a fire, you know, like towns have for tornado warnings or something. The whistle would go off, and then everybody would be ready to go, and they would all cast it. That means you can start fishing. So we would get up, we'd set the alarm clock. So it was this night, it was the night before this photo was taken. We went to sleep, they set the alarm. My dad got my brother and I up, and we got out of bed, it was cold, you know, and put on our stuff and our hip boots and fishing vests and everything, and then my dad took a second look at the clock, and it was midnight instead of 6 a.m. So that's referred to as the dress rehearsal. You know, we got all dressed, then we took it all off, went back to bed, and then got up again at 6 o'clock. So.
That's called, if you don't succeed, try again, correct? Seeing this tent picture reminded me of another thing. We camped always in a tent, and at one point in time when we went to Okoboji, where you saw we had a tent without a floor, and so we had cots, and the kids we all slept either on a cot or on the ground, and one morning I woke up and there was no Ron. And so, of course, panic-stricken, went outside, and here he had rolled outside under the tent and rolled outside on the grass and was sleeping outside on the grass on the outside of the tent. So that was the day when you didn't worry about things like you do today. And we did many, as I said, we made many camping trips. This was in New Salem, Illinois, Lincoln's home, where we camped. This is my oldest son, Kim, whom you met today. This is taken from a balcony overlooking Jackson Square in New Orleans, Louisiana, where we go for French Quarter Festival, and there are a few people there. This spring, in June, he was in New Orleans for a conference, and I went with him, and so he's changed a little since he was those first pictures we saw on the dock.
Any excuse to go to New Orleans, she'll take it, so
There-
conference, so she...
I went to, right. And this is a picture we took when there was a tour of the new stadium plans in Minnesota.
I tried to keep the same look that Bud Grant always had in his face. I don't know how well I did it.
And we went to Viking games, he and I, when they were outdoors, and it was cold. This is on the left is my second son, Ron. He is a cardiologist working out of Des Moines, Iowa, and his two sons, Ben in the center. He is a statistics person for insurance company in Chicago, and Curtis is on the right, and he's a musician.
This is my last story here. So, Kurt, my brother's oldest son, a younger son, yes, thank you, graduated from Northern Iowa in music, and he travels all around the country now. They have a network where somehow on email or Facebook or something, they say, "We're coming, can anybody put us up?" And so they stay on somebody's couch or something like that, and he's going all over the country all the time, and he plays baritone saxophone most of the time, and does a technique in which he never stops blowing out, because he's blowing out and then he's sucking air in the sides of his mouth at the same time. It's called, there's a name for that, and so he's giving it a shot out there, and plays the baritone saxophone very well, and also other saxophones.
These are Ron's three children when they were younger, of course. It's Curtis on the left, Hannah, his daughter, in the middle, and Benjamin on the right. Another picture of the three, Benjamin on the left, Curtis, looks like he's missing a tooth, front tooth, and Hannah. And it's somebody's, it looks like 7th birthday, probably Curtis's. This is Ron's daughter, Hannah. She's an artistic production and marketing associate with an off-Broadway theater company in New York City. She loves it there. I visited there. I'll only visit. And that's my daughter, Julie, with her. We were there on a trip in New York City where this picture was taken. This is my daughter, Julie, and her family, her husband, Ben, and two boys, Nicholas on the left and Nathan on the right. These are their two boys. She tried to make Viking fans out of them when they were young and did not succeed, because their father is a Lions fan, so now both boys are Lions fans and not Viking fans. So she and I are the only ones in that household who are Viking fans. She tried. This is a picture taken at a scout camp in Michigan. That's Ben, her husband, and Julie in the middle, and her two boys and myself. Ben and his father were very active in Boy Scouts. His father for many years, and Ben still is. He's very active in Scouts, and both of the boys are Eagle Scouts. And we would go there over September, Labor Day weekend, for a long weekend and camp at the Scout camp, where he spent many hours as a Scout and as a worker. These are Julie's two boys. They were volleyball players in high school, and that's Nathan, the younger one, on the left, and Nicholas on the right. Both boys started in grade school and played through high school and had state championships. Nicholas was a student at Milwaukee School of Engineering, and he was a very good player there, and he was the player of the year 2 years. And this is a picture of the two boys and their dad, Ben, at turkey hunt. And that's Nicholas with his first deer. They have property west of Madison, Wisconsin, where they do hunting and hiking. It's a very, very nice hilly area, and that's good hunting. This is my daughter, Julie, and she's holding a chicken. Julie, this leads to my chicken story. As far as Balbina is concerned, one of the things I remember about Balbina mostly, and I was their oldest grandchild, Balbina and Paul Kays, and so I spent time out on their farm before there were any other grandchildren around. And I remember Balbina walking across the yard with the chickens following her like she was the Pied Piper. It was just crazy, and she loved her chickens. She didn't want anybody else feeding them, gathering the eggs, touching them, doing anything. And so Julie likes animals also, and so in 2013 they bought 5 acres kind of out in the country, and her mission was to have chickens. So they got 3 black ones and 3 brown ones, and Ben built a coop for them, and they were in the house for a while. So and they each had to have names, and so this one is Balbina, in honor of Balbina, and there's a poster back there with some more pictures of the chicken. Ben grew up helping his father, who was a carpenter, and so Ben is very handy at building things, and so he built this. And so he built this. We call it the Taj Mahal, the chicken Taj Mahal, and so Ben and his 2 boys built this so Julie could have a place for her chickens. This is a later picture of Julie and Ben and their 2 boys. Nicholas is the oldest one in the center, and Nathan on the right. And they both live in Milwaukee, and they both are still students. This is a picture. I went to Hawaii with them in the year of 2013 over Christmas. That's myself and Nicholas and Julie and Ben in the middle, and Nathan on the right. And in 2015, over Christmas, we went to Florida. That's Nathan on the left and his dad, Benjamin, and the girl in the white there, that's Nicholas's girlfriend, and that's Nick, and then myself, and the guy behind Julie, and behind Julie and I is Nathan's college roommate, and he went with us. At our place in Moline, we had many Christmas gatherings and Christmas music activities. That's Ron's oldest son on the left, Benjamin playing trumpet, and Hannah playing viola, and that's Nicholas, Julie's oldest boy, playing the drums. Another music event, that's Kim on that one too, and Nicholas in the trumpet, and Benjamin in the trumpet, and Curtis on the right with his saxophone. We went in trip to New York in August of 2015. That's Ron, my son Ron, and right behind is that's Curtis, his son Curtis, and then Hannah in the front, Benjamin behind, Julie, my daughter, in the front with the white, and her 2 sons in the back, and me there. We flew to, and this is on the same trip, and this is Ron's daughter Hannah, Julie's son Nicholas, and Ron's son Benjamin. We were on a lobster boat, excuse me, in New York City. We were on a boat going to Ellis Island. Excuse me, that's Ron on the left, and his son Curtis. I don't know who that guy is in the white. He must have been the boatman. Nathan, Julie's Nathan, and then Julie. Same, that's Ron's Curtis, Ron's Benjamin, and Julie's Nathan and Julie. And next is Marlene's family. You give me a nudge when you want me to progress the thing.
Okay. So, my name is Marlene Sonic Meyer, and Sandy, my husband, and I went to school together, and we started young. In 1959, we were married, and we will celebrate 57 years this coming August. And we basically grew up together. Sandy lived in Easton and came to school there with the other kids from, it was Wells Easton High School back then. Okay, and these are our 5 children. Mary Kay on the upper left is the oldest, and she lives in Dallas, north of Dallas, in Plano, Texas. And she has visited Mary and Lawrence in Denton, which takes about 45 minutes or an hour by the freeway to get to Denton. And she took her boy there, and they checked out Lawrence's Angus cows, and he told me when Sandy and I went to visit him, he said, he showed me his Angus cows in his backyard, and he said that Angus sells for more money. He said, but they don't have to be all black. So he laughed and he said, just so they have a patch of black. So his had a patch of black, and they sold like regular Angus. So he was really, he thought that was a little bit different. And Joe is on our upper left, right up there. He's second child. And Lucy in the middle, she's third. And Marcia on the bottom left. And Sally is our youngest. Okay. And this is our family when the kids were young. And we lived on Arthur Street in Northeast Minneapolis. And Larry and Lorraine would have, like Sandy said, he always told Larry, teachers hardly ever work. So then they would come to visit over Christmas break, and of course Sandy went to work, but Larry and Lorraine and I and the kids, we'd have a lot of fun, and we go different places. Larry trucked us all over Minneapolis, and so this is where Larry and Lorraine and the kids visited a lot. And this picture is in Minnesota Lake. And my mother, I can't remember if Frank took the picture or Sandy took the picture, but the baby is Alexander, our oldest grandchild, and he was probably 1.5 years old. And we used to come down often to visit Mother and Frank, often, like every couple weeks we'd truck down there. And then when my mother was still well, they would come to Buffalo often as well. So that's the three of us there, Helen and myself and Alexander. And this is Mary, our oldest daughter, the gal who lives in Plano, Texas, and her husband Timothy, and their two kids, Andrew on the left and Robert on the right. And this is Robert. He started out very young playing baseball. Tim, his dad, had a huge interest in baseball, and so he promoted that with Robert, and he's just been playing ever since.
He looks like a well-coached, that's his father coaching him on the left, and look at that stance in there. He looks like
So now Robert plays, he goes to a Jesuit high school in North Dallas, and he plays baseball there, and has been, and he'll be a senior next year. And Andrew is Mary's second son, and Mary, Robert, and Andrew all love music, and Mary calls me a lot, and Andrew will be playing the piano, and Andrew is autistic, and he has other disabilities, but he loves her piano, and he just plays and plays. And so Mary takes care of him, and she just stays at home with him. And our second child is Joe, and our only son. He lives in Minneapolis, and he works as a commercial buildings technician, and he's a huge outdoors person. I think there's a lot of Tony in him. He loves the outdoors. He loves hunting. He's been hunting since he was 12. We lived in Buffalo, and it was quite rural back then, 40 years ago, and he just enjoys all kinds of hunting. And here's next is a photo of my niece Leanne and Joe, and they had been fishing at Lake Pulaski in Buffalo, Minnesota, and I think that's a walleye.
30-inch walleye.
A 30-inch walleye. And Leanne caught it. Only it was heavy, so he held it for her.
Joe's a good teacher, because it was my second time fishing with him, second out of the last couple hundred times. Joe and
And I think Leanne caught another walleye, equally that big, right?
That day we almost caught a 4-foot northern.
Oh, okay.
That ate the walleye that was on the fishing line.
So Buffalo has two beautiful lakes right in town. We live across the street from Buffalo Lake, and it's fed, the Crow River is fed from this Buffalo Lake. And Lake Pulaski on the north side of Highway 55 is spring-fed, and it's deep and crystal clear. That's a lot of fishing there. And there's Mary Kay and Joe and our grandchildren. And this is my third child, Lucy, and her husband, Tom. They live in Fridley, and they live near Sherry's house, actually, in Fridley. And Lucy is an artist, and she has painted a lot of nice things, and she's also a cancer survivor. She had tongue-based cancer. That was 5 years ago, and she learned to talk and how to swallow all on her own. She's very plucky. And this is at Lucy at their wedding, at Tom and Lucy's wedding, our family then. And here's Lucy and Tom again. Okay, right. And this is one of Lucy's paintings. And the next is Marcia, our fourth child, and her husband, John, and their little guy, his name is Dominic. And Dominic now is 14, almost 15, and he's a skateboarder. And he competes, and that's what he does, like lots of the time, and he's very good at it. And here he is, I think, at the state fair. He goes every year, and then they have a competition type thing. And this is Robert from Texas, the baseball player, and Dominic, and this picture is fairly recent. And my youngest daughter, Sally, and her family, the boys, Alexander, the baby that was with me when I visited my mother, Alexander's 24 now, and then Mitchell, and then that's Sally's husband, Brad, and they live in Buffalo, a few blocks from our house. And Sally and her two sons, younger, at our cabin near Brainerd. And we spent a lot of happy times there as well with Larry and Lorraine and the kids. Some wild, crazy times, but we always had fun. This is Al and Mitchell and Joe at the cabin, the grandchildren, and then this is Mitchell and little Robert in Plano, Texas. And this is our oldest grandchild, the boy that was in the picture with my mother. He is a professional chef, and this photo was taken when he won first place at the Taste of Buffalo competition, restaurant competition. And Mitchell is a student, and he likes the outdoors, and this was taken at our cabin as well. And here's Sanford and me. We've owned the cabin for 46 years, and we used to go just to be out there in the winter. We'd go check it out, and we probably were cutting wood or something. And so that's us. Oh, before I stop, guys, check this out. This is a flag that my friend found at an art fair in Stillwater a month or 3 ago. And it was a piece of flannel, and so I had it, Poland, so I had it framed, and Bryce is going to check this out, because Bryce thinks that it's either after the Civil War, Poland, or, is that right, am I saying that, or between the First and the Second World Wars, because now the Poland flag has red in it, so Bryce is going to check that out. He took a photo of it.
Thank you. So I'm going to narrate in place of my mother, who passed away in 1976. And so thank you. My mother married Tim Higgins, and Tim Higgins grew up on a farm in eastern Minnesota. My mother, of course, was in Wells, and all the family knew each other. They got married September 8th in 1962, and a year later my sister was born. And my father got a job in Rochester, New York at Kodak, and that's what drove him out of Minnesota. And I remember so many times my Uncle Sandy, the outlaw at the end of the table, telling me the story that he spoke to my dad, who said, "Oh, I'm gonna fly to Rochester and look for a house. I'm gonna work, and I've got a new job." And he said, "Well, what are you flying for?" And he's like, "Oh, it's Rochester, New York." So was maybe one of the first family people that had moved far away after Lorraine had moved to Illinois. So our family grew up in Rochester, New York, and luckily we had family come to visit. And the picture is Lorraine sitting down on the left, and my Uncle Larry, and my dad and mother, and that's in a suburb in Irondequoit in New York. And then the next slide. And this is myself on the left and my two siblings, Amy, my older sister, and by a year and a half, and my younger brother Patrick, who's a sports fanatic, and it started pretty early. You can see he's got a baseball in his hand, or a football in his hand. And 44 was Chuck Foreman's number. I just remember that. He used to recite that, and now I know who the Vikings are. So 44, Chuck Foreman. So okay. Go to the next slide. And that's the three of us at Christmas time, and we spent our Christmases with one family member, my dad's first cousin, who happened to also move out to Rochester, New York, to work at Kodak. And Christmases was our family, the 5, and the 4 of these other people. And that's it. And every holiday, every party was our family and the Lassiters. And we just yearned to be in Minnesota with all of our relatives and at Christmas time. And that didn't happen until quite a bit later on our first family trip out here. So we were kind of stuck in New York with no relatives. And I remember we'd go every summer to Minnesota, and it was our favorite. We just like, oh, when are we going to go? We'd be asking for the date. We'd finally come out and see all of our family, and we'd finally have a date set, and I'd tell all my friends at school, and they'd say, well, geez, we go to, Myrtle Beach in Florida, and they're like, where is Minnesota anyways? Is it kind of near the Rockies? So they couldn't place it on a map. So that was, it's funny that we hear that the family is all instilled in this generation, even still, and I was just thinking that anybody who would be interested in looking at our family pictures, but guess what, they're your family too, so hopefully you like them. Slide. And this is my brother and sister and myself at Halloween, just some family photos when we were young. Go to the next slide. And that's my brother and sister and myself about 5 years back at a wedding out in Rochester. So my dad had remarried, and finally we had family in Rochester, New York. And it was, believe it or not, it's an Italian family, and the cultures, the family gatherings and all the Christmases and Easters, etc., it's even different with somebody from a different nationality. So it was kind of interesting that all their family get-togethers were a little bit different style than we were used to. So, but this was my my step-cousin's wedding, and we became very close to their family, so, which was really nice. So, and my sister got married, and her husband's name is Tim, so there's a lot of Tims going around. Mary's husband is Tim, and my father's Tim, and my sister is Tim. So, and that was in 1986, my sister got married. So. Slide. And this is my sister and her husband Tim, and they had 3 kids. Go to the next slide. And these are my sister's 3 kids. Paige is the oldest on the right-hand side. Right now she's 26, and she just got engaged on Tuesday, so that's big, exciting news. She's a school teacher, and she teaches at the school where she was an attendee when she was 6 years old. So. And my sister's a librarian, and she became a supervisor a couple years back, and she was a stay-at-home mother, also to kind of help cut the costs on the daycare. And she loves kids, and she's got a couple cats. Megan is the girl on the left, and she's going to college right now for events planning. And I think it would be fun if she moved out to Minnesota and she could help plan our event, So take the load off of Lorraine's shoulders. And Sean's the youngest boy, and he passed away in 2004. He had meningitis, and he passed away. He got sick within 24 hours, so that was a big loss for the family, and I don't know how my sister held out through all that, but she's really strong. In fact, a lot of ways, believe it or not, she reminds me of Lorraine. I just see mannerisms and just part of the personality, and now that I'm around Lorraine more, I see my sister, so it's really interesting. Go to the next slide. And this is the 3 of them. They were on a trip to Florida, and I guess they did a lot of walking. By the end of the day, the kids were dragging, but they had a good time. Next slide. And these are the 2 girls of my sister. Paige is on the right, the girl that's getting engaged, and Megan's on the left. And if you ask me, Paige looks kind of like a spitting image of my sister at the age, and I tell them that, and they say, geez, we don't see the resemblance at all. But I said, you guys could be sisters. And a lot of the people in my family believe that Megan the girl who's on the bottom right resembles the Sonic family in their looks. So it's kind of interesting. People that don't even know them. And this is our family gathering at one of the Thanksgivings back in Rochester at my sister's house. My dad on the left, my sister in the back row, my brother-in-law Tim, my brother Patrick, my stepmother Joanne in the middle right, and myself and the two girls Megan and Paige. And again, this is just another picture, different order of people, same gang. So, the next one, and then we have Sherry will be the last one. Thank you.
As I look at the picture, I see my name, Sharon. And it's beautiful, you know, our mother spelled Sharon. I don't know if I've ever seen anyone spell Sharon that way. I'm sure there are people, but it was always very unique because people would look at it and say, Sharon, and, you know, all weird pronunciations. And so I go by Sherry. But anyway, so it's kind of weird to see that. This is one of my favorite pictures with all my sisters. Jean on the left, and then in the middle is sister-in-law Bev, and then Marlene and Lorraine, and the little girl is Lorraine's daughter, Julie. She was the flower girl, but I just love that picture. These are my two children, Jen and Michael. They both, they are about, I think probably Michael is about 2 or 3. He was a big guy. He was 10 pounds when he was born and 2 feet long, so he started out big. And they both live in the cities. Jen is a paralegal for a personal injury law firm. She has a medical nursing background. And Michael works for auditing firm. He's a CPA. Very busy, works many, many, many hours. And there they are again. When these pictures, a lot of them were taken at Schuster's. It was a photography place in Minnesota Lake. And Paul Schuster, the owner, he was a good friend of Frank Corey's. And so he loved to, when these kids come down and take pictures. And he got beautiful pictures of the kids. Here's my two again, and they are at Marlene and Sandy's cabin, fishing. And when I see this picture, it brings back kind of memories because Michael has, you'll see in a little bit later, he has a couple of boys and my grandsons, and the little guy is 4, and he's out on the dock, and he's holding up his fishing pole, and reminds me of Michael doing that when he was younger too. And those are their graduation pictures. Jen doesn't have all that hair now. Now she's got short hair. That was all natural curl, by the way. Yes. That is my son on the left there, and the taller boy is that's Blake. He's 4, and the little guy is Gavin. And he's just, you know, he watches whatever Blake does, and Blake wants to do everything Dad does. And that's the boy's mom, Bree, and they love the water. Bree's family has a cabin on a lake west of Minneapolis, so they go there a lot. And there's little Blake with his fishing pole, and Gavin's learning how to swim. And Michael was in sports all his life. I think he started playing when he was about 4. And Blake is his first year. He was in, he turned 4 in May, and he's in baseball, hockey, skating, and golf. That's what he tells me. Swimming. And he tells me, Grandma, I'm going to play those sports. Oh, he didn't tell me about the swimming, but he said, and then Gavin is waiting his turn patiently.
Not so patient.
Yeah, not so. This is a picture that I treasure a lot. This was taken at my retirement. Those of you know that I had a very long teaching career. I taught elementary education for 48 years. And I remember when I started Mankato State, after 1 year, I went home and I wanted to quit. I didn't want to go to school. I said, this just isn't for me. And my mother, there was no way I was going to quit school. And she said, you know, you've got to get education. You're going to need it someday. You got to be prepared. And little did she know, as I ended up raising the 2 children myself, and the many, many students that I had the opportunity to work with, and many, many memories. And I occasionally run across them in the cities, and whenever somebody says, Miss Kopesky, I know where the connection. So, and the gentleman, that's my daughter now, she has short hair, and Tim next to her. And they also are having a baby, and I will have a 3rd grandson come November. So 3 little boys. This picture, you can tell, first of all, I've loved ice cream all my life, and I still love ice cream all my life. You know, all those years that I was teaching, Lorraine and Marlene and Sandy, they were going on all these trips, and I could never go. So last September, finally, I was retired, I could go, and we had just gotten back from a trip to Albuquerque, and we stopped at, what's the name of the ice cream? Whitey's, and they do have the best guys. And I was sitting there, and you can just tell, it was just eating ice cream, being retired, happy days. Kim and Lorraine often, come to the cities and stay with me when they do things in the city. And of course, I'm very close to the Viking Stadium, so they stay. And we usually do lots of other things. And we were in St. Paul, but we were going to a concert, I believe, someplace. Okay, yes. And there I had the opportunity to go to a Viking game with them. And you're right, you wear lots of clothes when they're outdoors. And one of these people that I like at 80 and above. This was a cool picture. We went to, myself and my daughter, Jen, and Lorraine, we went to a trip to Alaska, at a cruise, the inland cruise. And this was at, they're famous for their Iditarod race. And we went to, this was a puppy camp where these are dogs will be training to run in those races. And oh my goodness, the dog barking, unbelievable. But they did stand still for long enough for a picture. And look at those mountains. I can still see those mountains. We had such a great time on that cruise. And this is another picture from the cruise. That's my daughter in the background and myself on the there. And this was some other people from our cruise that we knew. It was just fun. This was at the football game and outdoor. It was a little chilly, but not too bad. We made it. And that's Jen there with me. And there's a picture of our mother, and she married Frank in 1969, and Frank was so good to our mother, and she had lots of happy days.
One more section, it's when the four families got together and during the mixes here, so we'll pass through that.
Right here, right here. You talk too if you need to.
Yeah, we better make it quick.
Yeah, it's getting on. Oh, gee, the stair step.
The mic if we have to. Just go ahead.
Was this on Arthur Street?
Rochester.
Oh, the Rochester, that's
Daly Boulevard.
Okay. Marlene's 2 children, Mary and Joe, and that's
Amy?
and Amy, and I don't know
Lucy, yeah, it's all in order of age. So Marlene and Sandy and the whole gang packed up and drove to Rochester about 14 hours and visited our family a couple, 2 or 3 times, and we would do vice versa. We'd leave at 2 in the morning, so my dad would get us up, get us go driving, and that was like our favorite thing to do would be to drive to either Moline or Minnesota. And so these are, I think, some of the family events from those times.
This is on a beach somewhere. I'm not sure. It's my Julie on the left, and Leanne, or Amy and Leanne.
Lake Ontario.
Lake Ontario, Leanne says.
Knew where it was, we didn't know where it was. There was a good picture of them at the beach, but we didn't.
Was in our basement in Moline with the Myers visiting. We had lots of good times. That's Julie with the goofy look on her face, and Leanne with her back to us, and Joe in the back by the telephone, and Lucy, and my son Ron. Same group, same thing. We had a lot of good times down there.
Goofy looks.
This is my family, Kim and Ron on the upper right, and Julie in front of Kim, and Joe and Mary Kay Meyer, and was that Lucy
That's
in
Lucy,
between
yeah.
there?
Yeah, the other girl must have been a baby.
This is the same thing, Joe, Meyer's family and my family. Is that on Arthur Street? I'm not sure where that is.
Plain Army.
Plain Army, yep. We had many gatherings with the Myers. On the left-hand side is Ron in the back, and Kim, and Joe in front of Kim, and Mary, Marlene's Mary, and then in the front, left-hand bottom was Lucy and Marcia, Marlene's two, and the girl in the red is Julie, and same on that side. This is more of the crew. The light brown sweater was Joe and Mary in the rocking chair, and Kim and Ron and Julie, my three, the others. Another picture of a gathering that, I'm not sure where this was.
Buffalo, I think in Montrose Boulevard,
Yeah.
Buffalo, Minnesota.
Well, okay.
And our family drove out
Yeah.
to Minnesota, or flew.
And this was in our yard in Moline, Illinois, with the Higginses and the Myers and the Orens, all mixed together and different ages and different conditions, the way it looks on their faces.
And I'll mention my brother, the youngest on the right, had to sleep in a tent with 7 girls. So I don't know where they
His favorite thing to do. This is in Minnesota Lake, where Mother and Frank lived, and I'm on the left with Jim Higgins and Sherry and Julie. My daughter Julie is the little one. This is a gathering at our house in Moline. On the back left was Jean, and then myself sitting, and then behind that was that Marlene?
Yes.
And Sandy and Sherry with her head half turned, and Tim Higgins and my husband Larry. These are my 5 grandchildren, Ron's 3 and Julie's 2. This is I'm not sure where this was taken. This is, on the right-hand side is Mary, and then Kim, and my daughter Julie, and Marcia, and then Marlene with the pink skirt, and her daughter Sal, and that was Ron's wife, Amanda, on the left. That's it. This is in Buffalo. That's Sherry and Marcia and Leanne. And this is at Myers Cabin, where we spent many, many fun times there. Somebody caught a big fish. It's the Myers children and the Oren children. Also at the cabin, that's the Myers and Sherry and her 2 children. And they also caught good fish. Look on Michael's face on the bottom left-hand side there. And this is at Myers cabin also. Do you know what I don't know what okay, there's a lot of Myers in there, but I'm not sure who those other people are.
cabin making. Yeah.
That's Marcia and Dominic is in the front there, and I'm not sure.
Okay, I see Leanne back there, okay. Tell.
Okay, so this is at the cabin again, and we're, I think we're putting Class 5 gravel in the driveway. The driveway is a half a mile long, and so over the years, we keep throwing Class 5. That's it. And that's Lucy. She's our cancer survivor, and she just caught, this was like last week or the other week, she caught this huge northern in this lake.
Cool, that's cool. That's recent then.
Yep, very recent.
This week.
This week.
Oh, wow.
And Joe riding the boat, and Larry caught something.
No, that's this guy.
Kim.
Oh, Kim.
Yeah. And I took the picture of him on Mille Lacs.
Leanne was with us and she took the picture.
Oh, okay.
Kim's old boat.
This picture, I'm not sure where it was taken. That's my daughter Julie on the left, and Marlene, and Leanne in the middle, and Sanford, and myself on the right. And I forgot to tell you when we were talking about Julie, she works for Pfizer. She's a global regulatory affairs for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and her husband works for AbbVie, which is also a pharmaceutical company. This is our trip to Colorado, Sanford and Marlene and Sherry and I. We had a great time.
We were probably in Colorado.
And Sherry and Sanford and Marlene. And this was at a planning committee in Texas. That's myself and Larry's wife in the green blouse, and then Mary, Marlene's daughter, and Kim, and Larry Stencil, and Sanford and Marlene.
No, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience, guys.